Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 86, and I'll be talking to Michael Whitehouse, who is the guy who knows a guy. In 2014, he came to Groton, Connecticut, knowing no one at all. A year later, after diving into networking with both feet, he was a major connector in local community. In 2020, he went global and began connecting entrepreneurs, investors, speakers, and others around the world to people they need to know. He offers his services as a networking concierge, making connections and building strategic alliances around the world. He is the host of the Daily Morning Motivations podcast and the Neurodiversity Superpower podcast. Hello and welcome to Michael. How are you, Michael?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excited to have you, the guy who knows a guy, and a guy who does so many different things, from morning motivations to neurodiversity. There's so much under your belt there. So I'm curious and I'm excited to delve into this conversation to learn more about you. So, with all that you have learned and all that you are doing, what do you believe about yourself, and do you feel it defines who you are today?
I've been using the moniker "the guy who knows a guy" since I wrote the book back in 2017, and there was a time when I first started networking where that was all I brought to the table was connections. I didn't necessarily really have a business. I didn't have much service I could do, but I met a lot of people. And by meeting people, I can make introductions to those people. And that was a form of value I could create that could serve all kinds of people. And the great thing about networking is if you network effectively, you rise to the level of the space you're in. So it obviates imposter syndrome. If I go to the World Forum in Davos and I do my thing, I'm connecting world leaders because that's who I'm around. I'm simply a conduit between them, which is kind of cool. I never have to worry about how cool am I. It's how cool are the people around me, and I'm naturally at their level. And as a connector, that automatically brings me up to them. So that's the kind of through line of everything I'm doing. So now my business is Networking Concierge. People hire me to make introductions for them to do basically kind of done for you networking. I mean, they have to have the meetings, but I filter to connect them to the people that are worth having the meetings with, and that makes sense. And then a lot of that success has come when I came into alignment with who I really am, particularly around my ADHD, which I sometimes call ADN, because ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And given that I built a 6-figure business by embracing it, I don't think it's a disorder. So I call it attention deficit neurotype. Yes. Once I started to realize that some of my superpowers come from my neurotype, I said, I bet there's a lot of other people out there. Not I bet. I'm hearing a lot of stories from other people out there who are successful because of their particular neurotype. We need to share that story because there's so much about ADHD is so hard and autism is so difficult to deal with, and dyslexia is such a disability. Meanwhile, there's people out there saying, I'm a millionaire because I'm dyslexic. I'm a millionaire because I have autism. I'm a millionaire because because I have ADHD.
Right.
We should be sharing that story. That's where we really need to be sharing. So that's where the Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast, which as we speak has been on the air for all of 3 days. So the Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast and the summits and the masterminds and all that are coming out of that. So that's a quick overview of a bunch of things about what I'm doing.
It's beautiful and so enriching and so diverse in all that is offered to encompass all of who you are, essentially.
Yeah, I do a bit of this and a bit of that.
Yeah. And it's fabulous because as entrepreneurs or individuals who are self-employed or choose to be their own boss, if you will, sometimes it's more challenging for us to look at the ugly pieces of ourselves, right? And we just want to focus on the good because that's what's going to potentially generate leads or income or contacts or whatever that looks like. So good for you for repositioning and reframing the ADHD piece as a superpower. So well done for that.
Well, I'd say we look at the ugly parts of us. Most people look at the ugly parts of themselves all the time and wallow in them and cover themselves in them and don't look at the positive parts. So they say, oh, I have ADHD, so I can't get a good job. I have dyslexia, so that holds me back. Instead of looking at that part, ADHD comes with pluses and minuses. Autism, dyslexia come with pluses and minuses. Being tall comes with pluses and minuses. Being male or female comes with pluses and minuses. Sure. Advantages and disadvantages. And most people like to focus on their disadvantages because your disadvantages are a great excuse. Oh, I can't do that because I have ADHD. So I don't need to try. I don't need to put effort in. I don't need to think about it. Can't be done. I don't think about flying to the moon. I can't do it. It's not worth putting any energy. How would I get to the moon? How would I build a rocket ship? I can't. I'm not going to. I'm not going to think about it. I can end the conversation right at the beginning. I don't really want to go to the moon. It's very cold there and very hot when the sun's on it. I don't like heat, so don't want to go to the moon. But so many people focus on that negative. They say, why can't I instead of how can I? So for things I do want to do, like not work for someone else, have money, take flying lessons, buy a house, which I've done. For those kinds of things, it's how can I? What do I have? Take an inventory of what you have, and then realize the strengths you have. And very often, the first exercise you can do is look at your perceived weaknesses, all the reasons you think you can't, and ask the question, how is this weakness a strength? So if you're saying I've got ADHD, I can't focus, I have trouble getting things done, and say, well, what in ADHD could be the reason I could succeed? Or another example that you hear sometimes in the corporate world, not so much in the entrepreneurship world, but in the corporate especially, is someone who said, well, I can't get ahead because I'm a woman, and women can't get ahead because of the glass ceiling. Well, women have access because a lot of women decided they were kind of fed up with this and had a lot of knowledge and skills after years in corporate, having to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. They went off on their own and started forming their own networking groups and their own support teams, their own coaching programs. So there's a lot of resources I don't have access to, and I'm not complaining. I'm just saying I don't, that women do have access to. So because corporate is not a path, there is now this other path. But if you're focused on, well, I can't get ahead in business because I'm a woman and the men in leadership don't want to promote me. Okay, how is that a strength? The strength is outside corporate, there's a much smoother path where in 5 years you can be out earning all those jerks who aren't paying attention to you, running your own business. And then of course the best success is to get invited back as a consultant to the company you quit because they wouldn't recognize your abilities, where they now pay you more than the people you're advising, so you can tell the guy who ignored you how to fix his company.
Absolutely. Yes.
But it's really about, looking at those weaknesses and the reasons why I think you can't do it and saying, how is this a strength? Whatever it is, I've got 4 kids. I need to take care of them, so I can't get ahead in business. How does having 4 kids help you be successful? Some of those successful, I joke that the qualification for a successful operations manager is having some number of kids over 2 or 3. Because almost every operations manager I know working for an entrepreneur has multiple children. And the consensus is if you can manage 2, 3, 4 kids, then you can manage, then whatever the business is doing seems simple compared to that. Because at least no one cries or throws something at you when you try to make them do their job.
And it's all in perspective, right? It all comes in perspective. Absolutely. What do you believe is your calling? Or one of your callings in this life?
So my overall calling is bringing people together. So networking is part of that, making connections. The Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast and mastermind are part of that, bringing together to share ideas. I've created a private exclusive networking group that's invitation only, which is about bringing people together. But my other calling, kind of more mission-based, the one that almost by definition can't make me money, is that I want to help people navigate the modern economy. Most people are living by a playbook that was written in the 50s and 60s. So we still live under this delusion that you go to school, get good grades, go to college, get good grades, get hired by a good company that'll take care of you, work the promotion track, retire with a gold watch 35 years later. Right. And that existed for the mainstream worker between about 1948 and 1975. That was a span of time. There were people who were born during that time who didn't get into it because it was over by the time they got to work. Like, that's how short a window it was. But it was long enough to impress on at least the American psyche, and possibly some around the world as well. I'm only in America, so I don't know. But it's enough to impress in the American psyche. That's how business works. Yes. So you have people who grew up in the 90s who are being told this how it works, and they didn't experience it. Their parents didn't experience it. No one they know experienced it. Because prior to World War II, a very thin sliver of the working world experienced that lifestyle. And after the 80s, a very thin sliver to almost none of the working world experienced that lifestyle. And now we're back to a more entrepreneurial world, whether you are a employee or you're in your own business, where if you want to get ahead, you switch companies. Pretty much nobody gets ahead unless they're really good at office politics by staying in the same company for 30 years. Right. Doesn't happen because they hire from without, they promote from without. If you want to get a raise, you need to at least shop yourself around and go to your boss and say, hey, I just got this offer. Are you going to match it or am I leaving? Right. Which is, an awful way to run a business and a terrible way to run an economy, but it's how it is. Yes. So if you're still thinking that you go to school, get a good job, and you'll be okay, the analogy I use is it's like kids spend their entire education learning to play baseball and getting the right equipment and learning how to bat and catch and run and pitch. And then they show up to their first day of the game and they got their batting helmet and their bat and their catcher's mitt, and they walk out into a parquet floor, and at either end there's a hoop 10 feet off the ground and some big orange balls on the ground. And they're like, this is not the game I learned. How the heck do I play this? And you got a bunch of people wearing catcher's mitts trying to play basketball in the economy. And meanwhile, other people who learned to play basketball were just running past them, grabbing the ball, slamming it in the basket. They're saying, this world's not fair. Well, if you take off your catcher's mitt, you take off your batting helmet, put down the bat, and play basketball on the basketball court, you're going to do a lot better. But most people, no one's taught them how to play basketball. No one even knows which hoop they're trying to get the ball in. So what I found is it's actually surprisingly easy to get from minimum wage work to making a decent living, but it's a completely different path. It's not even risky. Like, this isn't the 80s where starting your own business meant needing $100,000 of investment, getting an office, getting a phone line, doing all this stuff. You can start a business now with, go to town hall, spend $5 for a DBA, or don't, website, Facebook account, couple business cards for $15. You can start a business for $100 or less and start making serious money, but no one's telling people this. So this is my mission. This is my calling, is to spread that message. And of course, people are so indoctrinated that a lot of times when I tell them, they're like, what? No, that's not the right way to do it. We need to change the government. We need higher minimum wage laws. We need this, we need that. And okay, good luck with that. In the meantime, you want to learn how to not be broke. Yes.
And it's so interesting how you talk about that indoctrination, because even though we are way beyond the time zone of that golden watch era of lifetime achievement award, so to speak, with one company, the indoctrination of higher education and the process of getting all of these accreditations is still very strong. And I'm not mocking higher education. I think it's valuable and it's needed for certain things and causes and careers, absolutely. But for some individuals or for some career paths, I don't believe it's needed.
Yeah.
I really don't believe it. I think there's a lot more education and a lot more insight and value available on the shelves or in e-readers. A million people have written books probably over the last 2 years of their experiences and insights and wisdom that they have gained in life. So,
yeah. Well, and here's the thing: is if you're thinking, I want to get a business degree, I want to get into business, because business is kind of the generic thing you might do. You're thinking, I want to get into business, so should I spend $140,000 to go to business school? That's a lot of money.
It is.
Or here's something else you can do if you're willing to spend a bit of money. Live in your parents' house. You don't have expenses. Start a podcast. And the mission of the podcast is your journey of discovery. Figure out the direction you're looking to go, whatever it is. Have some kind. I want to be a coach. I want to be a graphic designer. I want to be a whatever. Have that mission in mind, and then find 100 successful people and interview them on the podcast with the premise of, I am seeking advice from 100 mentors, 30, 60 minutes at a time. I'd probably do a long form, 60-minute podcast. 60 minutes at a time, and talk to 100 people who will on the air give their experience, their advice, tell their stories, probably coach you, because as I always say, coaches can't not coach. You get a coach in front of you and you tell them what you need and they're going to start coaching you. Plus, every coach loves coaching on the air, because of when people say, so what's your coaching like? Oh, I actually did it on this podcast. Check out this interview. It was great. So let 100 coaches coach you on the air, give you their advice, teach you things. And you will come out of that with, first off, 100 connections, and second, 100 hours of advice, which you can now go back and listen to anytime, focused on what you need, answering your questions. And then if at the end of that, you're like, okay, I think I'm still not there, then go to college. Then spend $100,000 if you need it. But that's what I did last year. My podcast was 50 or so interviews, getting successful people on my show. It's The Guy Who Knows a Guy podcast, season 3. 50 or so people, and asking them how they're successful and how they got there. Like, what's your story? What did you do? How can I do it like you? And let them teach me. And I got tens of thousands of dollars of free coaching recorded. I can go back and listen to it. You can listen to it. Anyone can listen to it. And from that, I launched a 6-figure business in 6 months because I went out and did that. So, like, the knowledge, as you're saying, knowledge is cheap. Anything you need to know, you can get ebooks for free. You can go on YouTube. You can get entire courses for free, or $7, $27. By even without a podcast, you could probably go to a bunch of people and say, hey, could you share your knowledge? But a lot of them are going to say, you need to pay me because that's what I sell. But you put them on a podcast interview and they'll be like, sure, I'll share knowledge on a podcast. That gives me exposure. So there's so many paths that are so simple once you know them. Absolutely.
And I couldn't agree more, Michael. I think it's also making a decision of, if you choose to do higher education, how many hours are going to be required for that? Even if you break it down into a year, was it a 5-year degree, whatever, how many hours are you going to commit to actual school time, study time, and all of that, and then do the conversion and see what that's going to look for. And another really interesting point that you leaned on there, and I really value that, is finding a mentor, finding a guide, finding a coach, finding somebody who is going to resonate with you to motivate you and empower you to stretch a little bit more out of your own comfort zone, because we don't know what we don't know. And that's why we invite people who know more and who know better for us to guide us on that path. So I'm a big advocate for that. And I just feel like I need to put a disclaimer here. Any institutes or academia places, I'm not poo-pooing them. I have higher education myself, and it was amazing. It was brilliant. But for it to translate in everything that I'm doing today. Not quite, but one could always argue that point anyways.
And the problem with higher education is most people do it backwards. So if you're saying, I want to be a doctor, you know what you want to do. You want to be a doctor. So you're following the path to become a doctor. Most people say, I'm going to college because that's what we do. I'm going to college to go to college.
Right.
You then get out of college and discover what you needed when you were in college. So college is a great time to make connections. It's a great deal. If you're in college, you should still do the podcast path. You should still be doing the mentor. And because in college, you've got time, you've got connections. Any expert you need to meet, if you're going to a respectable university, you've probably got nationally renowned experts at your fingertips. You can approach any professor in the university and say, hey, can I get your advice? And that's their job, is to teach you. That's what they're paid for. Right. Whereas once you're out of school, good luck going back as an alumni trying to get their attention. So, but the problem is you get out in the work world, they're like, oh, now I know what I need. Too bad I don't have access to it anymore.
Yes.
So, people going to college, I think they assume that the university will have some plan for them because they're paying a lot of money for it. Now, if you take a $10,000 coaching course or coaching, program run by a coach, if you take if you join Dan Mangana's Micro to Millions program,
right,
and he's got a plan for you. Like the goal of that program is to get you to be able to manifest large amounts of money. So you can just kind of show up and say, I'm here. What do I do? And he'll be like, all right, do this, 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 and this. It takes you to the goal.
Yes.
If you join Joint Venture Insider Circle, then they're going to say, okay, our goal for you is to get you a course that you can joint venture and make money with. And you say, okay, what do I do? And they say, all right, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. They walk you through. You show up in college and you're like, I'm here. What do I do? And they're like, well, what do you want? And you're like, wait, a degree, I guess. Okay, here's how you get a degree. Take a bunch of courses. Yeah. Well, then you have a piece of paper. I got a piece of paper on my wall. If I had a hole in the wall, it'd be great for covering it up. That's pretty much all my degree is good for. I don't have any holes in the wall, unfortunately. So it just hangs there looking nice and very respectable. But you need, if you're going into college, you have to know, what do you want? So a lot of people just go straight from high school to college. And that's why you end up with kids who, major in drinking with a minor in video games.
Right.
Because they don't know what they're there for. There's like, you got to go to college. Okay, cool. Now what? Okay. And I think if they realized, if they realize you could come out of college making $500,000 a year, or you can come out of college making $50,000 a year, and it's based on the decisions you make in those 4 years.
Yeah.
Because you could absolutely, no question, given that I built a 6-figure business in 6 months, simply from basically meeting a lot of people and getting their advice to figure out, what my asset is that I can sell. If someone were to go into college and say, all right, my mission is to come out of here making $500,000 a year, my mission is to come out of college, and the first year out of college, I want to make 7 figures, $1 million.
Right.
If you go in on day one with that's your focus, then you're now thinking, okay, how can I do that? Who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to ask? What resources am I going to seize? What am I going to get involved in? And it's cool that a lot of kids in college, they get into political activism and things like that. It's a great chance to explore and learn and whatnot. It's great. But that often sends them on the wrong track, because they're not working on themselves. They're working on these grand causes, and many of the causes are misguided because they're 18, they were sheltered, they just discovered this problem in the world that they had no idea about before, and now they're going to change the world. But this isn't 1973, and you're not stopping Vietnam. And a lot of the things that the college kids are fighting aren't that important. Some of them aren't even real. They're things that aren't like they're happening, but they're happening in such a small niche corner. It's not a thing. And even if it is happening, it's not that big a deal. I mean, some of the things that they're fighting are really big, but some things aren't. It just kind of gives you, they're doing it for a sense of purpose, for a sense of meaning. I'm 19 and I'm changing the world.
Yes.
Whereas they don't realize, if they were to focus on themselves and their capacity and say, how can I build my skills, my network, my resources? How can I figure out my calling? How can I figure out what is monetizable? What will give me that? If you come out of college, if you spend 4 years in college fighting to save the whales, reverse global warming, whatever it is, all good things, versus if you spend those 4 years preparing yourself to be successful, and then in your first year out of college, you make $1 million. When you're 24, you can make a lot more impact on global warming, the whales, the manatees, or whatever else with $1 million in the bank than you could marching in every protest you can find.
Absolutely.
Because you're marching to get the attention of the guy making $1 million a year. Well, shouldn't you become the guy who makes $1 million a year? Wouldn't that be an easier way to influence the world? To be the person with influence than to try to find them? But people go into college not realizing what it's for or what they can do, and everyone's indoctrinated to think, oh, you can only do so much. You're only one person.
That's right.
And even if they are told, never underestimate the power of a small group to change the world. That's because the small group was focused, not because they marched with some signs and bullhorns.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With that being said, what do you feel are some of the attributes that connect you to your purpose?
So I have come to realize that my ADHD really drives me to my strength. So I came out of college, talk about undirected in college and after. That was me. I came out of college with a degree, and I did not have the patience or attention to get a job. I started the job search process, like, what you want me to do? And then an interview, and then write a thing and another thing, and I got it. What a rigmarole. I could just start my own business. And I did. And I didn't know what I was doing, and it failed. It didn't fail. It was very successful, except for not making money. I built a community space. It ended up becoming a nonprofit. The nonprofit lasted for 10 years after I left. So not a failure, but didn't make money, didn't get me a lot of influence. I bounced from job to job. I joined all kinds of organizations. I gave each one a little bit of my attention, but was never truly impactful in any of them, and spent 20 years thinking I was, kind of a loser drifting from thing to thing until the pandemic hit, and I refocused and said, let me follow my path finally, and realized I'd gotten about 70 years of experience in the past 20 years because I drifted from thing to thing. So I came here and learned something, and I went here and learned something, and went here and learned something, and went here and everything I started and did for 2 months and then went on to the next thing. You learn the most in the first 3 months you're doing something.
Yes.
So I learned all that, and then compulsively met people because I didn't have anything else to do or know what to do. So I just met a lot of people and made a lot of connections and made a lot of introductions. And so through bungling around, I discovered that I love meeting people, and my best way of learning is to do things for a little bit and then move on to the next thing and do some more things. And so that's given me the ability to make connections among people, make connections among ideas, carry an idea from this place to that place. And so that gives me my great strength to be able to leverage those connections both for my own business and for other. I'll talk to someone who says, oh, I'm working on this cause, a nonprofit, whatever. And I'll say, oh, okay, you need to meet this person, this person, this person. I'll just shoot off 3 introductions, 3 emails, 3 introductions. And they'll come back to me and say, holy, wow, this person's amazing, and this person's amazing. And this has been so impactful. You just moved us forward 4 months. And I'm like, yeah, I know people. Awesome. So, I'm only as good as the people I know. I just know better and better people.
Yeah.
So that allows me to leverage. It takes me 9 minutes to send three introductions. And in those 9 minutes, I create a whole lot of value.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it took me a long time. Well, first I had to realize what I was trying to do. And that's why I'm so passionate about this concept of kids in college are massively underserved because no one tries to figure out what they want to do, and not what job they want to have.
Right.
But what they want to do and be, and then help them get there. Partly because people working at universities don't know.
That's right.
Because the people who understand this don't end up with jobs in university career offices.
Yes.
If you're working in a university career office making $51,000 a year, you don't know anything about following your dreams.
And there's a mic drop moment right there, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the issue with teachers too, teachers have followed they want to be a teacher, which is fine, but they don't know anything about being financially successful. They don't know anything about entrepreneurship, most likely, unless they become entrepreneurial because they can't live on the $35,000 a year a teacher makes.
Right.
So if someone's been a teacher for 20 years, they probably do understand entrepreneurship because they've had to. So they do have a side business in order to survive. But that's the issue with teachers, is they only know academia. They went elementary school, middle school, high school, college, master's degree, teaching. they've been in teaching the whole time. They never left
Yes.
school. Now
That's
they're
right.
just the teacher. And so to them, grades are of supreme importance. Degrees are of supreme importance because that's what they've striven for their entire lives.
Yeah.
And the way they're measured now is how the children they teach do that,
That's
which is
right.
fine as long as you want to raise teachers. But most people, what they need is not to get more degrees. They need to learn how to follow their actual path and not just say, I've got a goal, but actually how to execute on it. And that's, millennials are a generation that was taught to have big dreams and goals and never taught to execute. And you have a very burnt out generation because they were taught to have big dreams. They're taught to expect big things. And then their first job was corporate, and either they got fired from it because they're expecting dreams and goals and, unicorn meadows, or they stayed there and burned out and just said, oh, these dreams were all a lie. The world's a lie. Everything sucks.
That's right.
And either way, it was not good for them. They were ill prepared. Gen Z is a bit better prepared because they watched their older siblings and parents of the millennial generation get ground under, and they're like, all right, the world is very harsh, but some people get ahead, so I probably can too.
Right.
But it's not about hopes and dreams. It's about plans and work.
So right. A little bit of sweat equity, as we say, right? And I think as entrepreneurs, we all need that, and we all have it in abundance because it's redefining that goal and that purpose and that calling that you have and really honing that in. So then I ask you the question, what are your intentions with your crafts that you have harnessed and really fine-tuned, especially over the last 20 somewhat years, I want to say?
Well, I fine-tuned it in the last 2 years. I kind of threw a bunch of things in a big bucket for 20 years. So are you asking what's next?
I'm asking you, what is your intention with your craft? The craft of not only connections, but embracing the ADHD portion of yourself with all the other shows that you have, in you feeling more comfortable and much stronger and possibly more confident in who you are. And here are my skill sets. So here are the intentions that I want to share with the world.
Okay. Yeah. So my intention going forward is to do a lot of addition by subtraction. So what I've learned over the last 2 years is that my success lives not beyond my comfort zone, but deep in my comfort zone. If I'm uncomfortable with something, it's likely because I'm not meant to do it. There's a point in life where you need to stretch your comfort zone because you're not comfortable doing anything. But once you've stretched it to its natural boundaries, it doesn't need to stretch any further. So I'm not comfortable cold calling, pitching, closing. I'm not comfortable making 100 phone calls. I'm not comfortable doing a lot of minutia type work. So I don't do it. I either find a way not to do it, or to automate it, or to delegate it, or just to eliminate it from the system. And the more I've done that, the more successful I've become. So that's how I run 4, 5, I don't know how many podcasts I run now, because I've simplified it. I create, the Power Lunch Live show is a StreamYard show. So I have an application, people fill it out. I grab some of the, grab people, put them into dates, send them the link, show up, hit start, hit stop, done. That's it. That's all I do. I don't do anything beyond that. It is a 60-minute show that takes me about 65 minutes per episode. Maybe 68 minutes. I have to send out that first email. But it was like 8 minutes of overhead plus the 60 minutes of conversation, because that's what I want to do. I don't want to do more. I don't want to promote it more. So I don't. And the more I lean into that, and the more I can leverage my time and activity, the more success I find, the more I'm able to help other people, the more I'm able to share a message. And so a lot is about finding what are these systems that create high leverage. So the new Neurodiversity Superpowers podcast is going to get people onto an email list so I can share more knowledge with them, invite them to a summit, and then invite them to a mastermind, which is fairly modestly priced, but will charge. Thus, I'll be able to build the business with revenue, but also give much more impact than just listening to a podcast can give by bringing people together to help each other
Absolutely.
And support. So it's finding those leverage points where I can do a small thing that can, stand on the right lever and move the world, by helping people, ultimately helping them discover their greatness, their assets, and how they can navigate this world and become successful in it. Because there's a lot of success out there for people.
Yeah.
The GDP per capita in the US is $67,000. So anyone making less than $67,000 a year, someone else has their money.
Right.
So someone's making $20,000 a year in the US, then 47,000 of their dollars is in someone else's hands. And then you figure out who has their money and what value they can provide to make that person voluntarily hand it over, which is basically how I built my business. There's so much wealth. 1% of the population can feed the world now. Like I think it's 1% of the world is farmers. So almost everything we do now is not about food, shelter, survival. I don't know the exact number. It's 15 or 20% of the population builds necessities. Food, shelter, water, electricity, whatever. Yeah. And the other 80% do other stuff.
Yes.
So there's all kinds of other stuff we could be doing. Yeah. So there's plenty of wealth for everyone, especially with automation. There's a lot of, in the old days, there was crap work that needed to be done. Someone needed to clean the toilet. Someone needed to make the sugar cane into sugar. And these were awful jobs. And nowadays we have automation.
Yes.
If you were to look at a modern sugar factory versus a 17th century sugar factory, nowadays it's people with hairnets and white jackets pushing buttons on machines as something goes whir, whir, whir and does it. Versus, in the old days, it's like arms getting chopped off in machines and burns and breathing toxic fumes and whatnot. So, no one needs to have awful low paid jobs. The reason people have awful low paid jobs and thus their bosses take their share of the money is because they left them. Yeah. And some of that's because there's no unions, at least here in the US. They're really taking care of those people. But it's also individually.
Yeah.
This is not the 80s where you don't have a college degree, you can't get a white collar job. This is 2022. If you have an internet connection, you can make six figures. Not tomorrow. You can't be like, I'm just going to go on the internet, make a bunch of money. But you can make a living doing any number of things once you realize you can do them. Before I figured out what my business was, I was making my living driving Uber, which, let me tell you, does not feel like work at all. It's driving around. You may be able to tell I like talking to people. It was driving around, talking to people, listening to audiobooks and podcasts and music, and driving my car.
Yeah.
No part of that is work. And I made $30 an hour doing it. So there's so many opportunities if people can find them.
Absolutely. And it all begins with you as an individual and recognizing and trusting that there is more to what society and the system that we live in has created.
Yeah.
So taking the introspection time, like you did over 2 years and like many did, and I know I have over the last 2 years, being a little bit more introspective and allowing that to fuel your next step going forward, rather than saying, okay, I did a bit of journaling, it's all good. Okay, now close the book. Now what's next? But absolutely.
And also recognizing if the way you're currently making your living is draining you, so you don't have the energy to do that, find a different way to make a living.
Yes.
It may mean doing Instacart or DoorDash or, some simple job where your job is to sit by a door and push a button for 8 hours a day.
Right.
And, because there's so many other opportunities. I mean, the economy is shifting now. It's no longer as much of a worker's market, but still there's so many other opportunities. And especially if you do a little bit of networking.
Absolutely.
I know, because I'm starting to put people into jobs. And once I'm starting to figure out where the needs are, it's not hard, because once I make the introduction, the person employing, most of these are contractors. They're not employees, because that creates a more free-flowing dynamic that we don't have time to get into. But there's still, the great opportunities, often better than quote unquote jobs.
Yes.
And often it's the employer who is happier to get the introduction than the employee.
Yes.
because they've got a need. They need someone to make these calls. They need someone
That's
to do
right.
these follow-ups or write these things or do the whatever.
Mhm.
And the person I'm placing, they have a job. It's just a crappy one. And I'm getting them a better one. So
That's
so
good.
they don't recognize the opportunity, but they're like, okay, yeah, I'll see what's there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the entrepreneur I'm placing them with, like, oh, great, I need someone to do this. Like, my business will jump 10%. So I'm totally
Right.
happy to pay them a reasonable
Right.
amount of money because
Yeah.
I'm about to make $50,000 a month more once I get this block unblocked because of getting this person. Of course, I'll pay them $5,000 a month. Why wouldn't I?
Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful connection and a beautiful gift that you offer to your network and to the individuals you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to preface it with sometimes it's a temporary measure.
Mm-hmm.
So sitting by the door, pushing the button, or doing Ubering or whatever it is, it can be a temporary measure. And
Yep.
sometimes we need that to reformulate
Mm-hmm.
who we
Mm-hmm.
are, where we want to go, and just settle into it. Because one thing we know for sure, change is going to happen.
Yep.
So whether you want to embrace it and hold it fully for what it is and ride with it, or allow it to pass you by and to change you, that's your choice.
Yep.
But the invitation there is for individuals to take hold of the change and be in charge of the change.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And creating the space for it. That's why you would Uber, because the job you had was exhausting or taking up all your mental energy. And Ubering doesn't take any mental energy. Just do what the app says.
That's
like a video game with your car. It's great.
This is Michael, this was such a pleasure. Such a pleasure having you on the call today and learning so much more about you and your craft, and to be able to utilize your superpowers for the greater good. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your talents, and your gifts. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great to be on here.
I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.